This is Tirana's AcreForward, the ag industry's most thought-provoking podcast. Listen to interesting people as we go in-depth into the issues affecting crop advisors, growers, and farm communities, uncovering the truth about the ag business and using technology to prepare for the unforeseeable. Ready to explore the future? Let's dig in.
So I'm pleased today to be joined by Tyler Tobald of JTAC Farms. Let's just stop here. You guys might know Tyler, Dr. TikTok Tobald. He's out there making some waves, sharing some things from his farm, giving our man Seth at Shape of Ag quite a run for his money, getting out there on social media, sharing what he knows. We love that here because I think what makes agriculture better is taking very small communities and bringing them closer and closer and finding ways to share, not just waiting for 5 generations to make you what you are, but start bringing people together. Because look, we're moving at the light of the speed of data, right? The world's changed. So Tyler, you're in Kansas, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been farming?
This year, growing season 2023 made 10 years.
10 years farming. Now, how'd you get into farming?
I kind of made a long way around the barn. I ended up, I was a musician growing up, quite gifted, went to Kansas State University on pretty much full scholarships from multiple instruments, graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts, and after getting some medical issues and some severe burnout, I ended up back home trying to figure out what to do with my life. And my parents, who were they were very supportive of me trying to figure out how to fix what I'd gotten myself into. They told me, stay home, work around the farm, figure out what you want to do for your next step. Okay. And in those 4.5 months that I spent back home on the farm, I had more fun, worked harder, and enjoyed life itself more than I had in the last 4.5 years at college. And then one day, my dad, who did not expect me to come back home, I asked him, I said, would you be okay with me staying home and farm? I know I have a lot to learn, but I think this is where I belong. And he darn near fell out of his chair.
I think there's a lot of dads, a lot of people in farming, it's tough. It's tough to have that legacy continue, to have a son come back and say, hey, Pop, I want to do what you do. I want to continue on the farm. I want to earn the right to take this and pass it on. You're a 5th generation to the 6th. I think that's got to be a really nice moment for you and your family. And I think we all go to, whether it's college, military, different jobs, experiences in life. And part of life is figuring out not just who you are, but who you want to be and how you're going to get there. And I can't think of a better industry to really sharpen kind of that focus and help build character than something like agriculture. It's not an easy thing to do, is it, to farm, Tyler?
No, it's not. And especially for those first few years, I don't enjoy being the dumbest person in the room. And people were talking fertilizer rates, different herbicide blends, and I was just sitting over there with a glazed look on my eyes, not having a clue what's going on, and ended up having to sharpen my skills from the beginning by myself. It was a lot of self-learning. It was a lot of ordering books on Amazon, reading papers posted on UNL, Texas A&M, K-State Ag stuff. It was a lot of work, and it honestly was for the better. It all stuck.
Yeah, I think we all learn in different ways, but the reality is once you have decisions to make, there's nothing like on-the-job training, right? You can prepare yourself. It's good to have some basics, but there's nothing like on-the-job training. I'm assuming, you've got a lot of support and help. What are the resources? Who do you lean on to be a successful farmer in north central Kansas?
One of the best teammates I've got right now, besides my family, is my local CVA out of Concordia. My crop advisor Kevin Swenson is absolutely top shelf. I swear he does the work of like 3 people, but he's always a bit like, I'll shoot him a text, say, hey, this alfalfa field we just tried to plant, we struck out for the second time. We're looking to try again in August. What can we do on it? And literally that morning, after walking our corn, we went out and took a look at that, walked around, and formulated a game plan.
So he's the Central Valley Ag, right? They cover Nebraska, Kansas, a lot of other spots. Pretty big cooperative. Tell me a little bit more about why you work with CVA and Kevin. And maybe next time we'll have Kevin on to get a little bit of a view of how he works with you. That's part of how we know each other. But again, tell me a little bit more about CVA and why you think CVA and Kevin are special and important to you.
Kevin is very, very customer oriented. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about what they provide for me is it's not just, all right, yeah, you need to get this posted, you need to get that, pick what you want. It's dialed in for exactly what you're looking for. The best specific thing I can give is when we were looking into corn, here on JTAC Farms, until last year, we had not planted corn. That was just not something we did here. We never believed it could work. I did a little research, talked to him a little bit, and he came back to me and said, hey, I think I've got just the corn variety for that ground of yours. It's tough, it's rocky, but I think this. And he went that extra mile to make sure I had all the information I needed to pick the exact right number to get the best bang for my buck.
No, we're going to show a little bit about that because you had some good stories about the corn crop, the bean crop, how you're able to look at it. Obviously, you're on the AcreForward podcast because you've gone to TikTok and you've been sharing. You've got the Vanna White or a green screen behind you. My team's going to probably put a fake one behind me here, and you point and you're showing to the world, hey, this is my farm. Every 10, 12 days, I'm getting a leaf level view that's detecting all these things. There's satellite, but I also have Kevin and CVA adding their expertise. So you're not alone. So when we're talking about the corn crop, before we had this call, we got to know each other. And in 2 seconds, we're opening the screen. And we're talking about your stand, your weed coverage, pigweed. I know that's a bad word. Palmer amaranth is not fun. But you and I could see the progression of it over 3 months together. And I'm in Indiana, and you're in Kansas. And we're having, I think, Tyler, a pretty substantive discussion that would take a long time to get us to understand each other if we didn't have this kind of resource. So I think CVA and Kevin are onto something and how they use this with you. I want to get into that. But tell me about TikTok. So I'm not on TikTok. My marketing team may tell me that we are. I don't know that we are. How did you get started with TikTok? And then really, what motivated you to put your farm, your leaf level stuff out there for people to see?
Well, I just kind of stumbled into it. I saw a couple TikToks that had found their way onto Facebook as Reels, probably 2-3 weeks later. And then I'm into a lot of cover crops, a lot of regen ag stuff that I noticed right away. There's this like boiling Cold War. It's Cold War, but people are still plotting a little grenade at each other on TikTok about this. The tillage guys and the regen ag guys, and they're in these 2 separate camps all the way to the other side, and they won't talk to each other. They talk at each other, with each of them thinking the other one's a bunch of idiots and not taking a second to actually listen to what they're saying. And that's one thing that growing up, that's my parents taught me is listen first, speak next. And if you can't listen, you shouldn't be speaking. And I like to listen to I don't agree with some different tillage practices, but at the same time, I also don't farm in different areas. So I don't understand their reasoning, and I want to learn why they do what they do. And now, I understand why a fella up in Illinois, Iowa, Indiana may want to do a nice, might need to open up that ground, warm up that dirt. Here, I got to keep it covered. If I warm it up, it's going to get, it's just going to evaporate every ounce of moisture.
So you see it, you, and I've been fortunate to be able to see a lot of crops over a lot of the world in the U.S., and even corn from county to county, state to state, depending on what line, like where you sit, your weather, your soil, everything's different where you live versus where I live. And then you get into the South, Southeast. I grew up in North Carolina. I've worked out that way before. What's amazing is I find that when you talk to people outside of ag, you have to explain these things that maybe we take for granted. So for one example is, why is there a difference? Why does it feel like there's a line after Nebraska and Kansas where the world's different in the Corn Belt? What is that? Well, we all talk about Tornado Alley, and we all know what I'm about to say. But if you know about the Marfa Front, named after Marfa, Texas, and just Wikipedia this, it's the way the weather moves across the U.S. as an example. And it gets into humidity and in the Gulf of Mexico and the weather. And so how much humidity you have and how much heat will affect things like disease, insect pressure. Like, we know these things, Tyler. The same thing when you get into tillage. The soil matter, what exists in different parts. Even North Carolina, I was showing someone like far east, and the clays that we grew up with, you know, the coastal plains, going into Piedmont, the mountains, and how that looks. The soil changes a lot, and it means you got to farm different. Or there are basic things. I don't know if you'll find this interesting, but, you know, these are things that are obvious when you say them, but when you live it, it feels different. So corn is, how many days do you have to grow? So as you go from north to south, you know, it gets colder faster. So going from Carolinas to Minnesota, you know, I moved to Indiana, then Minnesota. I always appreciated that I had a shorter season in Minnesota. But what I didn't think about, but it makes perfect sense, that plant has to fundamentally be a different plant. Not because of the time frame, the length of days that plant gets, the length of daylight at those latitudes in the north is significantly different and more variable than what you would get in the south because you're away from the equator. And these are just, I think it's the magic or the complexity of the biology, the weather, the chemistry. I don't think there's one answer. I think we can use science to use the human art to actually farm in your part of the world, in my part of the world, on another continent, because it takes a lot of data that, quite frankly, we don't even know how to put together yet. I think this is as complex as going to a doctor and having a doctor try to figure out what's going on with you as a patient. What do you think of that, Tyler?
Well, 100%. One of the things that I'm constantly saying is, while I personally believe that cover crops can be utilized everywhere, I don't know how they can be utilized everywhere. I think it's not as simple as following the directions on the back of a jug. Every operation requires a different application of practices. For us, our crop rotation, our cover crop usage, everything is tailored specifically for exactly what we're looking for. And every farm has to do that per their operation. I'm not a big fan of one size fits all solutions, because that one size that's supposed to fit all usually doesn't fit anything.
I agree. And then you have enough farms, even within your own farm, enough variability that doesn't make sense. And as much as I'd love to get into, I think I've had another guest get into tillage and cover crop and regen, and it does get passionate. And I think there's a lot of questions as to how much is too much, when, how, why, what are you trying to do? What we know is, with better data and with more information for you and your advisor, you're going to make the right, good economic choices to keep that farm healthy and productive. So we have jobs, so we have food, and so your 6th, 7th, 8th generations have land to farm on. I think we could all agree on that, right? Yes. So with better data comes better conversation. So I just find it really interesting you had the passion to kind of reach out. It's really neat to see that online. I don't know that there's many podcasts where having these conversations, if you actually go through what's happening or you go through YouTube, I don't really think we're talking about the why. So you're really into the soil health aspect of things. It makes sense. I think that's really important. Without that, we don't have a lot. What are the other things that you focus on that you're passionate about in your farm, Tyler?
I'm always looking for the next thing. What is it in the future that's going to set us up to be successful further down the line? I'm looking into automation, looking into drones, that there are a lot of different aspects coming up, and with technology changing at a lightning pace, that if we don't know what we're looking at and start making moves to adopt it, it's going to leave us behind before we even know what hit us.
I think that's right. So when you look at the tech, what's the hottest tech that you've seen lately? Like, what do you put in the tech bucket?
I'm looking, I've got two things that are really, really caught my eye at the moment. I've been watching drone spraying. I've been watching that for a couple of years.
Okay.
I got CVA actually had a field day a couple of years ago where they had Rantizo out with a couple of their spray drones. And I got the
opportunity to this podcast as much as they like. I just thought I'd interject that since this is a Tyrannus, but keep going. They're friends of ours. We like those guys.
I had the opportunity to actually fly one, and I'd tell you what, that was exhilarating. And getting to watch it work, I was all of a sudden hit with pictures of the future, just all of a sudden just flashing through my head. They were talking about swarms, the potentiality of them to be getting bigger. I mean, back then it was like an 8-liter tank. Was that T10 was as big as you'd get. Now, I mean, DJI Agris has got the T40s, and they just unveiled some spoilers for the T50s, which are supposed to be bigger yet. That's
you mean and when you say spoilers, because I'm not a tech guy, so I'm gonna slow it down. You don't mean the things that go on the trunk and kind of keep the back wheel sound. You're talking about like previews, right?
Yeah, DJI Agris has the T40 drone is available now in the United States. The T50, they just released some videos, some early specs. I think it's available maybe in 1 or 2 countries overseas. I'm not sure, but they're teasing the more of the future as far as the drone spraying goes. Like, I'm envisioning a future where it could rain tomorrow, and then as soon as the rain clears, the plant dries up a little bit, I don't have to worry about cutting ruts. I don't have to worry about compaction. I can load up a swarm of drones, each with their own spot to go spray. Within, if you're running the RTK with them, you're within 10 centimeters of perfection every time. And they go out, they go spray, and then I'm done. I don't have to wait for conditions and have an even narrower time window to work. I can get out there and get to work immediately.
Yeah, I think no doubt, like the application capabilities for crop protection and fertility, the choices that we're going to continue to have, I think there's a long way to go on some elements of these, but I think it's getting to a point where the way, whether it's that or automation on things that have wheels, the world's changing. So that's really interesting. Now, what I do know is this: before you put those guys up in the air, because it does take an effort, you got to get to the field, you got to know what you want on the tank, you got to know it's worth doing that versus a traditional method. You should probably know before you go. So, Tyler, on your farm, how does CVA and Kevin make sure you know before you go? I'm assuming you're using our AcreForward technology through CVA, so kind of walk the audience through why you were attracted to it, how you got into it, and then maybe we'll talk about your farm and how you see it, because I think people hearing this are going to go, yeah, really cool. I got Avenger-style drones up, zapping out weeds. Awesome. But then I say, well, wait a minute. Let's back it up a step or two. You got a big farm. You got a lot going on. How do you know what to do? How do you get a view of this? We both know satellite it's uniform. It's not uniform. We do a good job of that. But how do you really get a view of your farm? How'd you get started with that? And then maybe we talk about your experience so far with what this leads to, because before you can correct the problem, you got to see it.
Exactly. And last year, I was just getting started on corn for the first time. Didn't know a lot of what I didn't know. And I told Kevin, I said, I need as much information as I can get so I know how to make the best decision possible. And that's when he introduced me to you guys, Tyrannus Drone Scouting. And all of a sudden he's like, yeah, you can actually look at your fields on an app. I'm like, wait, what? Like I can actually look, and he's like, oh yeah. He showed me a couple of example pictures, and I was at that point I was like, say less. Just sign me up. I don't. It was like, sign me up. He's like, well, how many flights? I'm like, well, I don't know how many. These 4, 6. What the heck? Let's go all out. Let's do 6. I want to know what's going on. And now that the beauty of this is I have unbiased, cold, hard facts. You cannot argue with a picture that says, you are way short on potassium through this side of your field. You cannot argue with a picture that says, hey, you should have actually sprayed that spot. There's a whole bunch of bigweeds there now. Those cold facts, having all that information at my fingertips has been a real game changer. I can make decisions now. Last year, I was on vacation, first one I'd taken in quite some time, but I got a text and he said, hey, are you wanting to do X, Y, or Z? And I'm like, actually, no, I think we're good. I pulled it up. I was like, no, I think we're all right. We'd been talking about possibly spraying soybeans or something like that again, or spraying some corn maybe. We're talking about fungicide last year, stuff like that. And by looking at the information, I could say, yeah, no, the corn doesn't need anything. It's good to go. We're dry. There's no reason to drop $25, $30 an acre when I'm looking at a picture here that tells me only thing I have on this is focus leaf spot. That's it.
So I want to show that a little bit. And again, I think the audience, if they see you on YouTube where we do the video version, it's not a full demo, but just so they know, Tyler, we're not making this up. Yeah, I'm in Indiana, you're in Kansas, and we basically scouted your field as if we're standing over the plants together. And we had a conversation about a few things that happened. We started on the disease story, but very quickly, you and I, we talked about the Palmer amaranth. We looked at the history of how it grew on your field. We talked about your stand count. And I'm not going to replace Kevin. We're not going to see, but this is what CVA is doing. Kevin and CVA are saying, we want to be able at any time to say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what has happened. Let's do an intervention here. But when it comes down to getting ready for next year, now we know, Tyler, how you want to manage. We know how things happen on your farm. And together we can make a decision on population, on nutrition, on does this weed management program now make sense based on all of these factors? And that's what's really new. I'm used to this every day, but when I leave here and I talk to a farmer that doesn't know about this, it really does blow your mind, Tyler. I'm trying to imagine what it must have been like the first time you got a call from Kevin or a message saying, I'm looking at your field and this is what I see, and then you're on your app. Like, what was that for you to be able to see your farm at that level?
For me, it was knowing that him and I were seeing the exact same thing. It wasn't an interpretation. It wasn't someone's perspective being a little bit different. It wasn't just relying on common knowledge that everyone knows. Okay. It was we are having apples to apples discussion, seeing the exact same things. I could tell them, hey, I'm in that northeast corner with there's 3 little bubbles there. I'm in that second one there with the red dot. He can look at that exact picture, and then we're able to just dial in exactly what we need for that exact field, and that is it. It's a game changer. It'll probably be a phrase I use a lot of when I describe this. It's changed things substantially for us.
So I've enjoyed some of this discussion before we did the podcast. So I dialed up a couple of your fields. So I'm just gonna show quickly what it looks like on the mobile app for people. We could talk about what you think. I basically pull that in some order for you, and then we'll go in the web app where we see a little bit more, and we're gonna look at that disease issue where you and I had a Palmer discussion, because I think that's where the story's going to come out for you, Tyler's, how you and Kevin are going, okay, and maybe other things will happen as we look at the field. That's the magic of this. So here's kind of my commercial for any retailer member co-op that's listening to this. You can't afford not to manage without a tool like this, Because you can have customers like Tyler dialing you up, talking to you, reaching out, saying, here's how I can have a better plan so I can buy what I need, use what I bought, and continue to improve my yield every year. And you don't have to chase me down. You don't have to figure out what field I'm in. You don't have to call me for a breakfast appointment. All that comes. But in the morning, cup of coffee, you guys have a few links. You're looking at stuff, right? When I meant links, I meant hyperlinks looking at fields. Sausage links are fine too. But you're actually having a discussion about the farm. And I really think it makes a relationship different. And I think for people who are tuning in, here, I just downloaded your insights. You have a mobile app, right? This is Mac's way of just showing it on my screen so I can show it. But within a second, you can take this field and say, I know here's where I have nutrient deficiencies. Here's where I have insect disease. Same thing. You can see it over time and how it progresses. I took out all the satellite information. I mean, I just wanted people to see that you started off with a very clear understanding of your stand and your weed pressure from the beginning of the year. And then it just got better where you started to see some things. And I'm going to switch, but just looking at this, Tyler, does anything stand out as you remember kind of going through the app and working with Kevin that you learned when these insights came across? Because we were talking about like the diseases, which I'm going to get to on one of your fields here, right? So we're going to go to the other app, but here we did find some, right? So you would see this on your mobile app, like what I'm pulling up here. And then you were able to filter and say, I only want to see maybe where I have northern corn, right? And it shows up in one spot.
Yeah.
And what did you notice about that?
This is where Tyrannus has been a major net positive for me. This year, I made the decision not to run fungicide on here. And I had literally just that one plant that showed blight. Whereas I had a whole bunch of other stuff. There was some Holcus leaf spot. Okay. That's pretty innocuous stuff. No big deal. There's not showing me any rust, no gray leaf, nothing that I need to be concerned about treating. And also, after walking it and looking at some of the tip back issues that we've had and everything, it was an easy conclusion to say, this does not need fungicide. There's no reason to pour $25, $30 an acre into something that doesn't need it at all.
And what's amazing, what I'm showing folks here, so I went from the mobile app, which is a quick look, same thing. It depends on your screen. It looks great on both, but I'm literally zooming in. And now you're talking about this small amount of disease, which is great. Like, honestly, we look at these things, we go, hey, what's wrong? You looked at this and said, I know I got it right. So for next time, I know that this plant works. But what if Kevin's looking at this, or Tyler, our viewers are looking at this, even if I back out to the wide angle, I see something else kind of happening on this field. And now it's later in July. We'll go back a couple months in a second, and we'll look at what this looked like. But for our viewers at home, this is all artificial intelligence. What is this that I see near this disease? Is that a problem?
That's a massive problem. That is a bit of an oversight on my part.
So again, we didn't call you on to have this. This is the point. Who doesn't have a farm where there's something going on? So here we say, well, you've got some foxtail. Let's go pay attention to pigweed. So we pull it up, and the computer, that's what the yellow grid says. The artificial intelligence said, okay, I see it pretty much every square in this image has got, and it's a tight image, has pigweed. You take a look. How does this change your conversation with Kevin and what you're doing on the farm?
Well, this year I tried to, I didn't feel the need to spray this entire south side of the field. This field used to be split into two pieces, and the north end that was corn last year that was supposed to go to wheat failed, went back to corn for corn silage this year since I already had nitrogen on it. But going in, I knew I was going to have some weed problems to take care of. So we knew that north end was going to need sprayed. That south end stayed fairly clean for a bit. And having more residue to kind of hold stuff back, I made the call, okay, we're not seeing a lot of weed pressure. Let's just perimeter that side.
Right.
And then not hit everything in the middle, because all I'm seeing in the middle is mostly some foxtail millet from the cover crop, things like that, stuff that's not really going to outcompete the corn and usually be matured in a little bit. And so we made the call just to perimeter that south end, but spray all of the north end. And at the time, that seemed like, honestly, it seemed like a great decision. And for the most part, I would say it still worked out fairly well, with the exception of that spot there right outside of that boom width that it caught up with me.
Well, and that's what I was just showing. So back in May, and you go to June, July, like we saw it early on as broadleaf, right? And okay, we're going to check it. And now we're seeing it before it gets big, right?
Yep.
It's big enough. And so you basically had a view of this, and you've been able to take an educated assumption of, when do I need to intervene? Or do I just worry about a different plan for next year? And what did I learn? Is that a fair characterization of, because in 2 seconds, I think this is crazy. Like, you have people watching this. I don't know you. We just had our first conversation, and I'm literally going over your farm from May to several times in June and July, watching weeds, watching disease, watching how the crop has responded to your management choices and the things that are going on. And then in 2 seconds, I can also have a data layout that says, you know what, my stand started here. You had 2 stand counts with us, right? So you saw some things pop up. We should talk about that. But then you see how you've managed basically your nutrient deficiencies or your diseases or your insects. So you kind of know where you're at, right? I think that's pretty unique. So tell us a little about the stand. Like, you had kind of I think what you felt like was a tougher start. And then what happened from one week to the next when you looked at this?
To start out with, our planting season this year was just, the ground was dry. We had very, very little moisture over the winter at all.
Right.
We had ponds going dry, ground hard as concrete. It was, the planter guy said he was really having a hard time keeping, just everywhere he was going, keeping that rig in the ground.
I mean, look at this. When did you plant this? On May 9th? We're here 10 days later. See it here, right? May 9th? 10 days later. Look at this, Tyler.
I think it was April 20th.
Okay. We'll take a look, right? But I just want, as you're telling the story, like, think about how dialed in we get. Were these stand counts? What was your first response when you saw the stand counts? Honestly.
Oof. There was more skips than I was hoping to see. I noticed right away that we had a really, really hard rain. It was about 2.5 inches. It came in almost 20 minutes. It was just an absolute deluge, and I could see it smearing every bit of residue, everything across the field. And I immediately was a bit worried that we weren't going to get a good stand out of all this. Thankfully, it has bounced back somewhat. I mean, yeah, the stand's still a little lower than I would have liked to have seen. It was planted at about 23,000 average. And I think that hard ground plus that really hard rain, it did not give it a good foundation to grow from.
What does it make you think about, kind of, what would you think you'd do different next year?
Well,
are you still working that out?
I'm still working that out. There's not a whole lot I do differently, to be honest. I love the timing. I felt like it was just about the best kind of timing. In a decent normal year, this would have been pretty well just smack on perfect. The ground temperature was just about right where it was supposed to be. We had a little bit of residue. Overall, if there'd been any moisture at all to work with before we got going, this would have been a wonderful, wonderful start.
So when you look at this, you feel better. And like I said, we picked a couple of fields for you. So we don't always pick the best because you learn from the trials. You've actually managed a lot of things really well together with your advisor on this field, right? You've kept it pretty much, you've managed disease, although the weather has helped you with that. Nutrient deficiencies, you're learning a few things. You also learn about your soybeans. But, for me, I'm trying to get the word out for people to see if you're working with growers and you're helping them with advice on fertility, crop protection, seed selection, population placement, you really think you can do a better job without a tool like this, Tyler? I mean, seriously.
I think this is a whole new way of being able to look at things. I think this is possibly one of the best management tools that you can get your hands on, because you can see everything from, like you said, leaf level. You can see every last detail, like, to something so small as, catching literally one June bug on one plant's leaf. That is, being able to get into that fine of detail. It is a huge game changer. And
right, that's why I show it here. Is it's even picking up. You may be aware it's not a bad thing. It shouldn't be a scary thing to see what's going on your field. Like, you know that you've got some iron deficiency. That's going to happen. But now you know where it worked well, maybe. Like, you know a lot of different things and how it changes your plan. So as you look at this tool, are you and Kevin working out what you're going to do for next season based on the things that you're seeing in here?
Yeah, we're already starting to work on kind of what we're thinking for next year. I've got beans are going to be going behind that cornfield, that bean field that's going to wheat. But with beans, we've got a major issue here with iron chlorosis, and you have got to pick the exact right. If you know you've got some rocky spots, that you best be trying to find yourself some sort of type of plant there. Some sort of genetic trait in the number you're picking that is already ready for that, because our pH issues here can vary wildly based on the rain and everything. And in these rocky spots, we picked the wrong.
So I would see that when I look at, like, if I pull, like here on the screen where you may have nutrient deficiencies of different types, it checks out for you, right? You see where you have some nitrogen or some K or mag or sulfur. You can call that out, right? You can be a little bit different. And as you look through different times in the season, you and Kevin can say, well, here we picked up a bunch of iron on a different date, right? And you see exactly where that is, and you start to understand it. So you're using this to actually procure or decide next time you go beans, or you go beans on your farm in a very similar area, what you're going to pick.
Yeah,
based on these findings.
Yeah, that's gonna. I was a little worried when Dad told me this was the one we were going with. I'm like, that one's a little iffy. If we start off dry, we get iron chlorosis started in this. They ain't gonna slow it down. This is gonna really cause us some problems. And though that the number we picked is actually been doing great as far as drought tolerance, and I've been keeping an eye on that by just looking at pictures. And what I'm saying, that though it's doing great on drought, I can also see from these pictures that no, we're not doing great as on that resistance there. So we might need to have a sit down and say, okay, this number needs to be put on, this field or this field, but not any of these fields in this section.
So your dad was farming. When he sees you using this level of imagery and artificial intelligence to understand what's happening, how does that help the conversation? What's that look like? I'm curious.
My dad is very, very facts based. It's take emotion out of it. Tell me the facts. Don't embellish it. Give me the straight poop. Just let me know exactly what you're seeing. Don't add your extra opinions into it. What are we looking at? And this is being able to, I just whip up my phone and say, hey, right here, this is the problem. Right here, this is a problem. Now, we may not come to the same conclusions, but he can at least see exactly, he has the same exact information that I do. It's not me walking to the field and saying, hey, Dad, I saw a bunch of X, Y, and Z here, and then him having to take my word at it. He's actually seeing the exact same thing that I am. he may have a hard time wrapping his head around the technology concept itself, but what it does give, the result it gives us allows us to actually have a more in tune conversation with each other.
I think there's a ton of value in that. I was just looking, what's interesting, again, I'm kicking myself because I'm sitting here seeing where you had some weed pressure, you knocked it down, right, in the beans. But you see, so probably you and Kevin are having a Palmer Amaranth discussion going into next year for all of your fields, no matter what you're putting in.
Yeah.
Has that been a bigger issue, more of an increasing issue in your area over the last few years, or what's your read on Amaranth in your area?
It's been an unmitigated disaster. It has been horribly difficult to control. It's, I see people in the Extend Flex and the whatever the 2,4-D camp is, and they're all yelling at each other. Theirs works the best. I'm like, neither of them work all that great, and everything. That Palmer Amaranth has got to be the single most pain in the butt thing to deal with around here. I know some guys that have gone back to tilling because they're just so tired of not being able to kill it that they're like, well,
I'm pretty sure the people who are listening to this, you've got the ones that till yelling right now going, well, this is part of not tilling, right? You should expect that response. And there's truth in that, right? You give up some things to gain other things.
Yeah. And the field where I've got corn right now, it's going to have some sort of rye tricky cover crop that goes in right behind it. Okay. I've had great luck in the past being able to use that to help manage Palmer going into the next year. I had, it would be 3 years ago, had that on that north end of that cornfield where I had rye, rolled it. I used a roller crimper, planted the beans in it, all that good stuff. And I did not have to do a post on it. Having that much cover, that much competition, I did a good pre-program, and that's all I ended up needing for the entire season. And so I made two mistakes. It wasn't perfect. I'll guarantee you that. But what it ended up doing was it taught me some things that I'm going to apply and try this year. And having Kevin, who's also very open-minded about this stuff, he's been trying a few things as well. We can have this really good dialogue and try to come up with a better program that's going to work next year. Because if I can prevent it from even starting to sprout next year if this rye triticale, whatever cover crop will actually hold it back like it's supposed to, get that good growth on it to do that, plus a good pre-program, hit with kitchen sink. I mean, just everything we can muster at it, we should have a pretty good. It requires very good timing, and having Kevin that is available as he is, plus having all the knowledge and everything available right here,
right?
That allows us to make better decisions faster.
So when you look at this, I think this is probably the deepest we've done in this forum on a podcast. But again, we met you because the thing that we share is your work with CVA. We think they're really progressive and they've been a good long-term partner, and we know the services they can provide. So I do want to thank Central Valley Ag for making sure that their growers are receiving this kind of view. But it's nothing without Kevin. It's nothing without that group at CVA working with a farmer like you to say, okay, here's what's happening. This is what we see. And what you start to find is you're not really buying Tyrannus, Tyler. You're not buying digital scouting. You're receiving crop intelligence as part of a relationship, and you probably have 100 ways where you've made a better decision just because you can sit down and go through this and talk to Kevin. Does that sound about fair? Because I think whether it's tilling or not tilling, whether it's this chemistry, that chemistry, whether it's this crop, this rotation, your decisions are going to be different now, or I'm making that assumption based on looking at this all year with Kevin than they would have been without it. Are there things that surprise you? Do I have that right? Or am I selling this a little bit too hard for my audience here?
No, you're not selling it. You're 100% spot on. This allows us to take a surgical approach. It's not just, it's not just, oh, it's July 15th, you better start spraying fungicide. It's, let's look at leaves and see what it looks like. Oh, okay, well, we don't have anything here. It's not showing any sort of stuff to worry about. Well, then why waste the money if there's nothing there? It's July 15th. Everything's, I think the last one was July 17th, but there's nothing there. Why waste the money if there's nothing there? It's not just this broad spectrum approach. It's a very targeted, very surgical. And that is a whole different way of looking at this, because traditionally before it's, okay, well, it's, such and such date, probably better spray such and such, or, just spray it over the whole farm, whether it needs it or not. Now with this, it's now we can put together prescription maps. We can see, we were talking about the nutrient deficiencies and stuff. Okay, well, we can talk about, okay, that sulfur and potassium deficiency, was that now, well, let's look at the weather at that time. Is that going to be actual nutrient program failures, or is that because we were so dry and there was no moisture in the ground to make that stuff available? And we can make that better decision going into the next season. It is, I love having as much information as possible, and because I don't like making mistakes. No farmer does, no businessman of any type does. And if it's a mistake made because of lack of intel, then you don't realize it until it's too late. With this, I have all of the intelligence, all of the data, all of the information I could possibly need right there in front of my face, and that I can pull up anywhere in the world. I could be taking a vacation in New Zealand, and I could pop and get on some Wi-Fi, open that up and go, holy smokes. It looks like I am going to have to spray my beans with Liberty this year. That stuff's starting to get a little, well, we had, late stuff come up, and I can make that decision, send the message, have it done, and I don't really have to worry about it anymore. These decisions become so much easier, so much more targeted. It makes everybody's life a lot easier.
I fully get it. That's why we do this, right? I think it's, again, I'm looking just at your farm on my screen while we're talking, and I'm, my mind's racing, because it's, for me, it's, yep, you could do it while you're on vacation, but then when you get back, you can go back and understand with Kevin what's going on. You're going to be in the combines. That combine's going to ping this on this field, on that field, and, you may think you know why. But you have an advantage because you and Kevin, before you go, can look at all this together. You could call this up in the combine, printouts, iPad, doesn't matter. You could look at it, and when that thing's hitting, you're going to say, well, remember, this is where I had an iron issue, and this is where I had this, or this is where I had the palmer. And you could start to really get a picture to say, I'm going to make a data-driven, informed decision. Taranis doesn't tell me how. CVA gives me advice, but me as a grower, I can synthesize all of this, because artificial intelligence doesn't have enough data to do this for us. It still takes a human. You can take all this together and really make an informed decision. You're going to know before snow hits the ground what you need to buy and what you need to invest in your farm for next year with CVA, in part because of a tool like this.
100%. The last year I overlaid my corn yield map over the top. I did the old fashioned way. I had two pieces of paper sitting next to each other.
Right.
But I was looking at the yield versus some of the issues that I'd noticed over the season, and went, yep, by God, it was telling me exactly right. Here, my yield tanked, and it for good reason. This was why. And now all of a sudden, Kevin and I had a really good discussion about the needs for we did some grid sampling. We started working out a plan of attack that's not just going to be for next year, but we're actually working out a plan now for 2-3 years down the road, getting lime put on and prescription stuff, but because we're seeing issues here, and here. And that it's blown everything wide open. It is totally changed the game.
I agree. So I'm a little bit curious. So Kevin and CVA, how do you feel? There's a lot of confidence. You see a lot of things. Just a relationship between you two. How's that changed? Are you more confident? Do you have better conversations? Do you talk more? Do you talk less? Like, how do you feel about that as you look so far through the season, considering previous seasons?
Our conversations are very targeted. That's we get business out of the way just a lot quicker, and we talk our options. It's a surgical approach. And then once we're done with business, it's kind of like eating your Brussels sprouts before having a steak.
Okay.
It's we get the Brussels sprouts out of the way, and then it can be, hey, how's the family? Oh, hey, how's your corn looking? Did your wheat turn out any good? We can actually, it's not just we take care of our targeted approach, and then we can actually be humans to each other for a little while, and then you can move on to the next guy. It's allowed for a more succinct business side of things, but also allowed us to be more human with one another.
Yeah, I think that's what data does. I went to a doctor's appointment today, and I think I was talking about the auto dealership, and all these technologies come in. And now when you go to this appointment, they do blood draws, things like that. You just scan your license. You're at a kiosk. At first, I'm old enough, it feels pretty impersonal. But what starts to happen really quickly is everybody in the back is getting everything ready so they can keep you safe, they can take care of you, so they can get you in and out. And you have results almost same day. So you give up some things, but it actually creates more spaces to be human and more space to be together. I think same thing, we've had our cars worked on, different accidents, things like this. Before I joined Tyrannus, I think I've shared on other podcasts and in different forums, there's technologies I respect, right? There was some call center stuff back in the day that Zappos used. It's out of Indy. It's in another company now called CX Sharpen that I really liked. Then X-Time out of Cox Automotive. Some dealerships use it. And they send you a text, they scout your car. I'm going to use our terms. It gives you updates. And I thought about this a lot. And I really had one just hit me the other day. And it struck me how much more human that interaction is than a phone call arguing or trying to understand what's happening. It cuts out all the noise. So now we're talking about how do we make sure this vehicle is safe, that I'm investing properly, and you actually feel better about the company. So, I'm a father. We have 6 kids. I've been married 20 years. I don't think this technology takes away. I think this technology lets me choose how I'm going to use my time better so I can be with them, so I can take the time to be present to them and use what I've been given, my gifts, to make better decisions. So you're a father, you're a husband, you have a family. How do you feel about that? Because to me, Kevin does too, right? Kevin has a family, people at CVA. Do you think this takes humanity away, or do you think, I'm assuming we're on the same page here, that this actually creates, are you finding better use of your time as a result of working with Kevin and this AcreForward intelligence?
Oh, 100% yes. Being able to make better decisions faster. I'm all about efficiency.
Okay.
I love return on investment, both monetarily and with time. I want to, if I use something, I expect a return from it somehow to make my life better, whether to give me more time or to make more money. And one of the things I like with Tyrannus, it gives me more time. That's different things. I have metrics for how I approach everything. It has to benefit me somehow. And getting extra time is almost more precious than money. I don't know what you can make philosophical arguments back and forth on this.
No, I agree. I had our pastor used to say, you don't run out of time. You just don't prioritize the things you didn't do. Don't say you don't have time. It's a question of priority. Is that fair, Tyler? So now you have more information to make better priority use of your time, because we all have a finite amount of time.
Yeah. And for my wife and I, our son, we only have one kid right now. It took us 6.5 years to be able to have a child. And through all of that, having to go to multiple different doctors, multiple different cities, deal with so many issues. And then all of a sudden, now we finally have we have our kid, and my time through all of this, I had to be so careful with how I spent it, because I knew we have to get to the doctor, we have to do this, we have to do that, and I have to, make sure she's doing okay, and I gained an extraordinarily focused appreciation of how valuable our time is together. And now that we have our son, I appreciate every split second that I have when I'm not having to work with something, to be able to get to spend it with him.
I think you could waste a lot of life taking the long way around the farm when you have better options. And I think, so on the family note, you think when you become a parent, I can only speak to the father side of it, your priorities change. And you start to realize you don't do less work. You probably end up doing more, but you have to get more out of your time, because there's not enough for you to go around. I mean, being a father is all about sacrifice. And I think you obviously know that, and you're doing that. What I like about being here at Tyrannus, and this is probably off script quite a bit, is why we do what we do. I'm not here for technology. I like technology. It's fine. I like farming. It's good. I like life sciences. I like agriculture. I like the communities. But what I really enjoy doing is creating opportunities. And that we talk about profit and economics and ROI, all like it's a bad thing. And really, it's a very material, tangible way for us to show what's a priority and to create value and give each other opportunities. So the way we make money at Tyrannus is we work with CVA. CVA works with you. And Tyler, either you're getting value like you're saying you are, which I think is probably a whole lot more than, however CVA's work this out with you, and then CVA with us, and we're just growing that pie. That's fine. That's what we do. And we do it with the best AI. We do it with the best imagery. But why we do it is the reason we're still in business. The people in this company, look at this podcast. I do this, and the company supports this, and a lot of time goes into this, even though it's not Joe Rogan and it's small, because we are trying to reach out to rural America. It's a small group. We all live and work together. We're trying to raise families. We're trying to keep a stable food supply. We're creating jobs. I think that's really important. And all the folks that work at Tyrannus, whether they're here at our headquarters in Indiana, our innovation center in Israel, or our site in Brazil, they wake up every day, particularly the ones we've got here in the U.S., they come from farming. They come from retail. They come from co-ops. They come from this industry. But what's really fun is we're actually creating opportunities to create more jobs, more time. And if I said, what's the success? CVA goes, well, what's our ROI on Tyler and Kevin and how this works? We can do the numbers, right? He got a good stand count here, so he's willing to do a fungicide without disease because he needed to protect it because he was behind here. Over here, he's changing his fungicide program. He made a decision 3 months earlier. Like, all those things are real. But the story that works the most, when Kevin and Tyler need to talk, they're in preferred position. They had that conversation right away. And Tyler, his experience with CVA is such that he has more time with his beautiful son and his wife. And he has less concern at night. He gets better sleep because he knows what's going on. Is that overly dramatic, or you? Because that's why we do this. I want to be really clear. Like, the tech is great, but nobody would have put all these pieces together if you didn't have the right motivations. And our motivation was, there's a small segment of the population that can do these things. They need more help. We need to do a lot more to help our farmers and help our retailers. It's one community. Let's put it together, because at the end of the day, you're raising a family and you're raising the next generation. Let's make that better for you. That's who we have to be, right?
Oh, 100% agreed. Honestly, I'd have a hard time. I have a pretty good command over the English language, and I'd have a hard time explaining it any better than you just did right there. Having the peace of mind, knowing that I have all the information I have, that I'm able to go and make a decision that much faster, get back to whatever I'm doing that much quicker, to give me that much more time. The more efficient I can be getting things done can either be A, more to get done, or B, hey, I'm done by 3:30 instead of 7 like I was planning. I'll pick up my kid from the grandparents a little early, and we'll go look at some cows, look at cover crop, go home, and put him in his walker and run around in circles or something. I love having more time from efficiencies, or from being more efficient with different things. And that's my approach to a lot of things with farming.
Well, I've been around the world, right? You go and you look at a lot of cool places, and look, I'm 3 hours from Chicago. There's some neat things about a big city. Just got back from Israel. I've seen old cities like Jaffa, Jerusalem, and you go and you see these places, and it's beautiful. But I go back, and I've got 5 daughters and a son, and some of my favorite pictures and my favorite time is in a soybean field or a cornfield. And I know maybe that's just why I'm in the right job in geography, but even driving, I love the time of year where the crop's coming up, and you know when you're driving and you see how high the crop is or the status of it, what's happening, but you remember your life this way. I remember, I had vivid memories of my son. I have pictures of him looking out, watching soybeans getting planted, looking out at the window, or my daughters taking pictures and going through the bean field and asking questions. And I just think it's such a fun life to be able to live where the average person driving through, it's miles and miles of corn and soy. In your world, it's corn, wheat, alfalfa, but you know what I mean? It's miles and miles of crop. But what's happening inside that crop are full communities that are raising the next generation of Americans to serve, to grow food, to carry on our values. And I think that's very exciting. And it's really cool that technology, if you look at it and you use it properly, advances that cause. Like that's how we make things better. Is you're not going to save the world, but you can save a part of your field and you can get another hour back for your family. And if we do those things and we help each other do that, I think we're going to have a better place to live. I can't think of a better thing to do with our time, Tyler.
No, I agree 100%. I want to set Cooper, my son, up so in the future he doesn't make some of the mistakes that I made. I'm sure he'll make plenty on his own. And I don't want him to repeat some of my mistakes growing up. And I want him to have see that same appreciation. And I can't pass any of this along to him if I don't spend any time with him. And I want to reflect back on something you mentioned, different things that you through the past, you think, your son while you're planting soybeans and things like that. I have like different chapters have different images in my head. And, his first time in the combine when we were cutting wheat this year. Now to be fair, I was in a horrible mood that day. I was grumpy, crabby. The wheat this year was the worst we'd ever cut. But the absolute best part of harvest was when my wife brought him up into the cab and the look of pure wonder on his face, looking around, and he's just like, what is this? This is so cool. And that split second look on his face, that sticks. And different chapters, I can recall different points of my life by some of these images, and that's, I want him to be able to appreciate that as much as I do. And to do that, I want to spend as much time as I can with him, and I can't sacrifice the farm just to spend more time with him, but I can be more efficient on the farm, which gives me more time to spend with him. That's one of the reasons why I've been looking into automation and things like that as well, to try to, there are some times a year where I'm just not around that much and I don't like it. I hate leaving first thing in the morning and getting back near midnight. I like sleeping. It's even with a young kid, sleeping's good. And I'm striving to try to be more efficient, and that way I can, get home at, maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock and tell him good night and not worry about having to beat and stay out till 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah. And I like doing this. So I want to thank you. We've talked a lot about time. I want you to prioritize your time for the rest of the day. We're going to do this again. We have Shape of Ag on YouTube for those who are listening. So we have Seth Lawrence. He shows what happens on his farm. I got an idea that maybe Tyler, you and Seth do a road show. Maybe you both look at this. Maybe we talk about farm progress. We've got some things coming up as a company, but I want to say this. Our podcasts, they're wide ranging. We'll talk about the tech, but we talk about life, talk about how we do things. And I think we all learn, we all make mistakes, but you're the author of your own story. You're the author of the success of your farm. Every acre tells a story. Taranis is just here to illustrate it, work with good partners, give you the advice. And it's up to you to take that and say, here's how I'm going to make my corner of the world better, more productive. And Tyler, I see that you're doing that. Sharing it on TikTok. I got a whole crew that helps me look good. You're out there doing it, on your own, and it's pretty awesome. So I think that's great. I want to see more of it. I think we're going to have you back. I think we're going to talk to a few other farmers, keep this moving. But I just want to tell everybody that's listening to this, every acre does tell a story. We're here just to illustrate it. I really appreciate Tyler Tobald out of Kansas making the time for us today. And when we say AcreForward, I am passionate about this. We're going to drive more value from every acre, and we're going to understand that story. If you want to hear more conversations like this with interesting people across the ag industry, check out more of our episodes and subscribe to our podcast. It's the AcreForward podcast at acreforwardpodcast.com. Thank you.